He was the first president of the three-member presidency of the internationally recognized nation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and led the country during a period of war that was marked by massacres, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. Alija İzetbegovic's journey wasn't an easy one. He was imprisoned twice. The first time was shortly after World War II. The geography of the region, which has been at the forefront in all periods of history, has sometimes ignited world wars and has sometimes remained in the middle of the conflict between the East and the West. During the war, he became a humanitarian and joined the Young Muslims, a social movement that aimed to uplift the Muslim community in Bosnia and reinstill pride in their identity. But this activism came at a cost.
Ova grupa ljudi, to su bili budući ljekari, inženjeri, davali su jedan novi pogled na islam. Meni vrlo blizak je prijemčiv. Ja sam pristupio toj grupi i mislim da se nikad od nje više nisam odvojio. To je nešto što je pokušavalo da postane organizacija i nije nikad to, po mom mišljenju, nikada nije u cijelosti to postalo. Bio je to stalno jedan pokret ljudi. Ako bih htio da odredim opću orijentaciju pokreta Mladi muslimani, mogao bih da kažem da je ona bila antifašistička i istovremeno antikomunistička.
İzetbegovic was sentenced to 3 years in jail for joining the organization. As part of the sentence, he worked on a government construction site. After being released, he studied agriculture and law and began to work at several companies in Bosnia. When Alija got out of prison, there was a whole different world. He was in his late 20s, and Tito was in charge of Yugoslavia when he was in prison. A more challenging process awaited him. "1970 was a year of major importance for İzetbegovic. It's when he published his political manifesto. It presented his views on the relationship between Islam, the state, and society. He tried to reconcile Western-style progress with Islamic traditions. The communist authorities interpreted the declaration as a call for Islamic law in Bosnia and banned it. İzetbegovic was then marked a nationalist and sent to prison again. This time, he was sentenced to 14 years, but served less than half of it. He was released in 1988 after pressure by lawyers and international monitoring groups. His political career took on a new life when he founded the Muslim Party in Yugoslavia in 1989. A year later, he founded the Party of Democratic Action, or SDA. It immediately became the largest Muslim majority party in the country and still is to this day.
Njegov način, njegove poruke možda objašnjavaju zašto i drugi neće da ostanu u Jugoslaviji. Takvu Jugoslaviju kakvu hoće gospodin Karadžić više niko neće. Neće više niko možda osim srpskog naroda. Takvu Jugoslaviju su u očima jugoslovenskih naroda, Slovenaca, Hrvata, Makedonaca, Albanaca, Mađara, muslimana, jednostavno omrzli u očima Evrope i svijeta. Takvi načini kako to Karadžić radi. Međutim, jer Karadžić je samo izraz jednog načina, mišljenja, jednog pristupa, mi smo se sve nadali i nadamo se i dalje da će proraditi, da se naša nada, da će srpski narod doći do svoje demokratske tradicije, da će srpski narod otkriti one zalihe demokratske tradicije koje imaju svojega odlika, po kome je bio poznat u svijetu. Ovo što se radi danas, ovo ne služi na čast srpskog naroda. Na ovaj način ustupanja, ove prijetnje koje se iskazuju, muslimanski narod neće nestati. To ja poručujem gospodinu Karadžiću.
As Yugoslavia started to collapse and the conflict in Croatia began simmering, to preserve a united Bosnian state and a peaceful solution to the conflict, İzetbegovic initially proposed a loose confederation with the rest of Yugoslavia.
I am expecting some progress. Not too much, but some progress. Okay.
But do you think that these talks will lead to peace?
I have to hope. I have to hope.
On February 29, 1992, and then on March 1st, he led the Bosnia referendum that resulted in the independence of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Just over a month later, the EU and the UN recognized Bosnia's independence. However, the Serb leaders opposed it.
Well, this is a UN-controlled area. We expect the UNPROFOR not to allow the aggressor forces to sabotage the peace process, because this is the real intent, is to sabotage the peace process. Look at the timing just before Geneva meeting. This is not about anything else but about the peace process. They want to sabotage the peace process, definitely. And it should not be allowed.
War had broken out with attacks by Serbs. Serbian troops besieged Sarajevo. In dozens of cities and towns, Serbs began a genocide. Srebrenica was just one of them. The capital, Sarajevo, was abandoned to starvation and desperation under years of siege.
I'm calling once again on Serbian President Mr. Slobodan Milošević to withdraw immediately military groups coming from Serbia, towards Bosnia, over the river Drina.
Izetbegovic led the Bosnian army and the country during its toughest days. He enjoyed a remarkable reputation among world leaders. Izetbegovic, of all the leaders I dealt with during the war, was a man who conveyed only angst when confronted by the tragedy of the conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He was devoid of the cynicism or vanity that marked other war leaders. History will no doubt say that not all his decisions were right, but more than anybody else, he was responsible for the fact that Bosnia and Herzegovina survived.
Büyük bir devlet adamı, 20. yüzyılın yetiştirmiş olduğu en büyük devlet adamlarından ve aynı zamanda mütefekkirlerden birisi. Onun hayatı mücadelelerle dolu. İşte 9 yıl hapis yatmış. Bosna Savaşı'nı yaşadı, o acı günleri yaşadı. O savaşta halkını kurtarmak için büyük fedakarlıklar yaptı. Bir barış elçisiydi. Nefrete karşı politikalar istedi. Bu topraklarda nefret tohumlarının ekilmesini önlemek için büyük çabalar sarf etti.
In 1994, Serbian forces and paramilitaries increased their massacres against Bosnian Muslims. Turkey was not indifferent to what was happening in Bosnia at the time. However, Turkey was also going through a very painful period. In 1994, Turkey was struggling with unsolved murders and a crisis of political stability that was never achieved, which led Turkey to pursue a policy that saw it keeping out of international affairs. At that time, Necmettin Erbakan had an important guest in Istanbul. Miss Halide, Alija's wife, would address a memorable crowd in Istanbul.
Da ovde, na ovom mjestu, u ovoj divnoj islamskoj državi, govorim sa muslimanima.
Turkey launched a relief campaign for Bosnia. Millions of dollars had been raised for Bosnian Muslims. On the other hand, peace talks in the U.S. state of Ohio had come to an end. But July of 1995 witnessed a massacre that will never be forgotten by the whole world. Thousands of Muslim civilians were massacred overnight in the Srebrenica in front of the UN and NATO.
jula 1995. godine u srpskoj Srebrenici. Uoči još jednog velikog praznika srpskoga poklanjamo srpskom narodu ovaj grad i napokon došao je trenutak da se posle bune protiv Dahija Turcima osvetimo na ovom prostoru.
Later that same month, in the immediate aftermath of the Srebrenica massacre, Alija's first guest was Turkish President Süleyman Demirel.
All the security organizations, all the international community, they lost their credit. Then how it's going to be repaired? Now, everything is going on in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and then civilians were watching. They got to find some answer, not only to save the Bosnia and Herzegovina, to save their reputation, their own reputation. And therefore, I think the international community has to act.
Peace had to be now. Turkey has acted for this. Alija's path, this time, was to Ankara. On September 4th, 1995, Alija called on Richard Holbrooke to support the work for peace being carried out in Ankara.
But we're not sure that we can get it just now, during this peace process. But we said that we shall integrate other part of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but in a peaceful way. That we will get Srebrenica and Žepa in next 5, 10, or 15 years.
The foundations of the Dayton Peace Agreement were being laid in Ankara.
Turkey is a vitally important member of NATO. And as I said earlier, in the NATO Council on Saturday night at a critical meeting, the Turks were the first country to speak in favor of resumption of bombing. Turkey is in the UN forces in Bosnia, participated in the London conference. We are now discussing a peace implementation force that would exist after a peace settlement. With us on our delegation is Lieutenant General Clark from the Pentagon, who is coordinating our efforts on that. He has spent this morning in separate talks with members of the Turkish General Staff on that. I've not yet had a full briefing on that, but I know that the talks went very well.
Numerous negotiations resulted in the Dayton Peace Accords in December 1995, and the killings stopped. Justice has never been served in Bosnia. After years of international war crimes trials, no decision was made to extinguish the fires burning in people's hearts.
To my people I say, this may not be a just peace, but it is more just than a continuation of war. In the situation as it is, and in the world as it is, a better peace could not have been achieved.
At the end of 1995, the agreement reached in New York under the leadership of Turkey was signed so that refugees could return safely to their homes. A joint police force was formed by this agreement.
It will be the first multinational security force outside of UNPROFOR. So that's why it's an important starter, let's say, in the safety and security in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
For İzetbegovic, it was a temporary break, as the country was left heavily devastated with a complex political system. At the first post-war elections, he became a leading political figure in the country. He stepped down as a member of the presidency in October 2000 at the age of 75 due to deteriorating health. In 2003, Alija İzetbegovic passed away.
It somehow seems appropriate that today the sky weeps on Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Before he died, he did not forget his essence and where he came from, and wrote a letter to the Turks.
Turkey's sons, we are Bosniaks, but you are Turkish as well as Bosnians insofar as you feel the pain that I have in my heart. We have no history to be ashamed of, no memory to hide. We have conscience because of our religion, nation, books, and morals, not because we are responsible for the Serbs or it is compulsory by law. We did not interfere in the language, religion, sect of any nation, not because someone wanted it, but because the conscience guided it. You have to exist, so you have to be one and together. You should not be separated into the ranks due to the deception of the colonists. Turkey's sons, do not forget about what they did to us and your responsibilities. I'm Alija İzetbegovic.
Turkey has never forgotten Alija and the brutal massacre. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan visited Alija İzetbegovic in hospital to show his support and admiration when he was prime minister.
...19 Ekim'de vefatından hemen önce Saraybosna'da tedavi gördüğü hastanede yurt dışından dönerken durumunun ağır olduğunu öğrenmiş ve ben de kendilerini Saraybosna'ya uğrayıp ziyaret etmiştim. Merhum İzetbegovic orada bana şunu söylemişti: dualarımız sizinle. Bunu söyledikten sonra bu topraklar Osmanlı bakiyesidir. Bosna'mı koruyun, Bosna'ma sahip çıkın. O size emanet demişti.
What we call Bosnia isn't just a piece of land in the Balkans. For many of us, Bosnia is an idea, a belief that people of different religions, nationalities, and cultural traditions can live together.
Tekbir!